Question 17 looks very different from question 16, and yet I categorize them as the same type of question. They're both testing fragments and run-ons. And because of my experience, I would know that before I even started really solving, right? Like I can kind of just look at these answer choices and know that I'm going to be dealing with punctuation, with sentence structure, and I think that that's really important in order to be able to increase your odds of getting this right. And that really comes down to our overall writing strategy, which is to predict the question as best you can. So how would I know? How would I know that this is what it's about? Well, I see the word which in my choice, and which is a very interesting word in English. It's a word that we use to kind of change sentences into fragments. I also see that even though the underline itself doesn't involve any punctuation, I see that there's a punctuation mark very close to it. So those two clues tell me that it's probably going to be about the punctuation, and that in turn, because punctuation shows sentence structure, we're probably going to need to think about that as we solve. So let's look at what's going on here. Where do sentences begin and end? So starting at the beginning here. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot. I'm stopping at the comma because I'm testing whether or not that sounds like a complete idea. Could that comma be a period and kind of end my sentence? And it sounds complete, yes. So I'm gonna eliminate a little bit here. The real sentence is this. We have some other commas, and so both of these things kind of act as extra clauses. I don't think that matters particularly much for this question, but the more you can kind of learn how to chop things away and get down to the core sentence, the easier these questions will be. So the real sentence here, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot. That's a full sentence. Now, what does that mean? Well, I can use a comma to attach something else to that, but I cannot use a comma to attach another full sentence. So I have to be careful what's going on after this comma. It says, some of it drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. That sounds like a sentence. Really just listen to it. Some of it drifted over Greenland. Sounds like a sentence. In giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. So this is a problem. I'm going to kind of stop here because even just that part, there's a lot of extra attached to it, but just that part is itself a complete sentence. And so we've made a big mistake grammatically. We've created a run-on sentence, okay? We've attached a complete sentence to another complete sentence using just a comma. You're not allowed to do that. We could use a comma and a word like and or but or so, a word that's a conjunction that lets us do that. We could use a semicolon, but we cannot just use a comma. We need something more. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to think now how these other choices are changing the way of things. And I already know what the answer is going to be because there's a traditional fix to this. But let's just go in order. Let's read B. Some soot drifted over Greenland. That also sounds like a complete sentence. Some soot drifted over Greenland, right? I could start that with a capital letter, end with a period. So this is also a run-on. Let's look at D. Let's skip ahead because that seems like, well, if we want to keep things short, that's probably the best way to do it. Some drifted over Greenland. Now in that case, it's a little less clear what the sum is, but grammatically speaking, that is still a sentence. Some drifted over Greenland. Still a run-on. And that gets us to our answer. Some of which drifted over Greenland. Now, why is that helpful? Well, I could get into a whole long explanation about what the word which does, but I'm going to keep it simple. When we have run-ons, a general kind of rule of thumb is to fix a run-on on the SAT. It's very common that we replace a pronoun, like it, with a word like which. This is a very general rule, and there are probably a million exceptions, and I'm sure the SAT has tested half of them. However, more often than not, this kind of works. And so this is a complicated rule. There's a lot of heavy grammar, and some people do not have a good ear for where sentences begin and end. So I get that for you, when I say this is a sentence and this isn't, that might not seem obvious to you. That will take practice. You will get better at knowing the differences. But for now, I want you to kind of just follow what I wrote in blue here. To fix a run-on, if you think there's a run-on sentence, get rid of choices with pronouns, pick a choice with a which. That is a safe bet. It might not always be right, but it is a much safer bet than just kind of going by what sounds good. Because the problem with run-on sentences is that they sound good because they sound like two sentences. It's only when we write stuff down and have to worry about the punctuation that we have to think about a run-on sentence. When we talk, we don't think about whether there's a comma or a period between our sentences. That's not how talking works. But as soon as you write stuff down, this matters. And so if we can recognize that that's what they're testing, we're more likely to account for that and either apply the rule really rigorously or this kind of satisfactory version of the rule that will hopefully get us the answer. This is a really tough one, so I hope something about my explanation can go with you into future questions, because there will definitely be fragments and run-ons questions on your test, and very often they're difficult to recognize and difficult to solve. So something about this hopefully will help.